Hi, my name is Gianna Hoover, and I'm an intern at Work Wisdom and a student at Vassar College here today interviewing Adam Rohrer. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're
Awesome.
welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, to start off, can you just introduce yourself and your role here at Work Wisdom?
Sure. My name is Adam Rohrer. I am the podcast producer for The Behaviorist, and I have been doing that with Work Wisdom for probably 7+ years.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Well, what kind of inspired that and what drew you to Work Wisdom to kind of start the Behaviorist and to kind of produce that specifically?
Yeah, I guess it started because I was always a huge consumer of podcasts, like since the early days of podcasts, like the nature of my job, I can have an earbud in at work all day and I just honestly just listen to podcasts all day. Around 2016, I
Mhm.
think I wanted to start my own podcast and I've actually been into recording music. I'm a musician and I played in high school. And basically, I've been recording music since I was in high school. I've always been tinkering with that. So,
Mhm.
talking like 20+ years of experience recording audio. So, it was actually a pretty natural transition for me to start recording and
Mhm.
producing my own podcast.
Yeah.
I think the timing of all this was actually kismet, I would say. Right around that time, when I was wrapping up my own podcast,
Mm.
actually had heard the very first episode of The Behaviorist, which I had nothing to do with.
Mm.
And I already knew Kedron, the founder, and Sarah, the current president. And what I took away after listening to that first episode of theirs, that they're very good behind the mic. They are just
Mm.
both naturals at not only communicating their thoughts and ideas, but also at podcasting specifically, I would say. So after I had heard that first episode, we had a conversation, and I basically told them that with the interesting and informative content that they produce and were able to create, paired with the high quality audio that I knew that I could produce, that the behaviors could be something special. And here we are, 7 years and dozens of episodes.
That's amazing. I'm sure that just makes your job so much easier that it's so, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. And so then as a musician, as you speak of, how do you approach composing original music for the Behaviors podcast and then also like the commercials and everything like that?
Yeah. So first I usually talk with Kedron first or whoever is involved in that specific project,
Yeah.
just to kind of get an idea of the vibe that they are looking for to accompany the video. Whether that's a commercial or a promotional video or a podcast episode or whatever.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I'm kind of able just to get to work and use my imagination to create something that I think showcases and kind of sets the mood for that video.
Yeah.
And what I really like about scoring videos and commercials is that the vibe of it is the most important thing. Like there are typically no lyrics or words, so I can just use any instrument or sound that I want as long as it matches the vibe that we are going for. And it's really truly a collaborative effort that I
Mm.
think works very well. I
Yeah.
rarely, if ever, question their ideas or suggestions that they bring to me. And rarely, if ever, do they question the final result that I bring to them. And I think it's truly a creative collaboration that's built upon trust, and that's why I think it works so well.
Oh, that's excellent. It's awesome how you're able to kind of just like match the music with the vibe in general. That's super
Yes,
impressive and that's awesome. And okay,
thanks.
then what's sort of the process for ensuring that like high quality audio and video for the Work Wisdom studio? And like how do you then maintain consistency within that?
Yeah, I mean, the high quality part of that just comes from experience on the technical side. Some of it is trial and error,
Mhm.
learning which microphones to use and how to position them. And then actually the majority of the work comes after the podcast episodes are done being recorded. And when editing, I just have learned how to set the volume levels and the compression and the EQ and the reverb and where and when to fade in and out the music.
Yeah.
And just because I have personally put in countless hours over a bunch of years editing and
Yeah.
mixing music and podcast, I've learned how to make something sound at least subjectively good, or at least the best that I possibly can, and just something that I can be proud of. Um,
It's
The other part of that, oh, the consistency, I would say that just comes from being consistent. Like
yeah.
that sounds silly, but like the consistent recording of the episodes has made me have to learn how to be consistent with the final outcome. And that is achieved by making sure the environment specifically that we record in is consistent.
Okay.
And it hasn't always been. We started recording at my house when we first did that 7 years ago. And then there were a couple different, the Work Wisdom offices are beautiful and they have several different rooms in there. So we've used different rooms over the years, but now we are just lucky to have a dedicated studio within the Work Wisdom offices. And that consistent environment certainly helps in a
Wow.
consistent product.
Oh, that's amazing. And then how would you say you balance then that creativity and then also like the technical aspects of producing a podcast and then like what's rewarding about that?
Yeah, I absolutely love this question.
Mm,
This is actually something I have thought a lot about
mm,
often in my adult life.
yeah.
Sarah actually gave me this book years ago called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's
Mm-mm.
by this guy, Robert Pirsig. I believe it was written in like the 1970s. And in it, he talks a lot about that like conflict or butting of heads
Yeah.
of like the technical or the creative, or no, I'm sorry, the technical or like the scientific and
The
the creative.
culinary part of it versus the, yeah.
Yes, and how they can coexist or
Yeah.
not. And
Mm.
I mean, like Nietzsche was writing about these ideas like in the 1800s. So like
Yeah.
this is not a new idea, but that is a philosophical idea that I mean, I'm getting a little deep for the question, but like I've been thinking a lot about this in my adult life. So to answer your question, I would say philosophically and in the context of your question,
Yeah.
that they both absolutely exist. I mean, like even specifically when I'm recording an episode of The Behaviorist.
Right.
And so I am actually very right brained. So when I have like
Okay.
idea in my head,
Mhm.
I have to learn to use the tools that I need and get that technical part of my brain working in order just to aid in making that final product a reality. So I would say the technical parts of engineering and producing audio are more of a means to an end for me, just to make that original idea into a final product.
It's not like a black and white separate situation. You're able
No,
to
no.
figure out.
I mean,
Yeah.
I this might be a different answer for different people, but for
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
they absolutely have to coexist in order to make this like
Sure.
original idea a
Mm.
reality.
I also relate. I am right-brained as well. Tend to be. So I totally understand.
Yeah.
And my next question then is just like, what's the most rewarding part of it? Something maybe specific or just in general? What do you find most rewarding?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about and specifically with the producing of the podcast?
Yeah, producing of the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I want to like point to one specific project. Like with the podcast episodes in general, I feel like there's been so many good episodes. I don't know that I can pick out one. So I guess I would say
Yeah.
the latest commercial that we did.
Cool.
Um, so the video for that was already complete when I got involved.
Okay.
I don't think they knew for sure what they wanted to do with the background music. So then
Oh, okay.
after the video was complete, they
Mhm.
kind of came to me and just kind of asked me to figure out music that would fit.
Mm.
And so like not only like the timing of the video, but the vibe
Yeah.
and the build up and the different crescendos. So like
Yeah.
scoring commercials and movies and TV shows is probably like my dream job. If I'm being honest, if I could go back and do it all again, I would
Yep.
have worked really hard to figure that out in college and just put all my eggs in that basket. It's just like something that I find very rewarding
Yeah.
when I can see that final product put together.
Oh, that's all. Yeah, no, that would be an insane job to have. That would just be so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And so then maybe just like how do you stay inspired like when balancing all these different projects and all these different things going on, whether that's with just like podcast production in general or just like composing music for Work Wisdom, what keeps you inspired?
Yeah. Very good question. I would say that like the podcast production part doesn't always require me to be creative.
Hmm.
There are times where it does,
Mhm.
and I really love tackling those projects when they come up
Yeah.
because they're always unique and it really challenges me creatively. But the bulk of my job with the behaviorist is making the hosts and the guests sound good.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, like that's my inspiration for it. I've
Mhm.
become a bit of like a perfectionist
Mm.
about making the behaviorist sound as good as possible within the parameters
Yeah.
that we're given. So on the production side, I mean, like simply put, I guess you could just say that like the quality is my
Mm.
inspiration.
I love that. Okay, that's awesome. And then sort of like what are maybe some challenges that you sometimes face, whether that's with production and whatever it might be, but like then also then how do you kind of go through that process of overcoming it?
Well, a little peek behind the curtain with the behaviors. Sometimes we will record 3 or 4 episodes at a time.
Yeah.
And it's what's unique about the behaviors is that it's a rotating cast of not only guests, but often hosts. Um, and I think it's part of what makes the behavior special. But
Right.
it takes a lot of organization on my part.
Mm.
I take detailed notes when, for editing purposes, mostly when we are recording the episodes. And as I said before, I'm very right brained to the core. So like being organized is not a natural strength of mine, but I work hard at it just because I know it's absolutely necessary in times like those. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a challenge, but it's something that I've just had to work at and be very purposeful about.
Right. Like learn
Um,
to work with it kind of thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also say that the technological part of recording can be a challenge sometimes. We've been doing the podcast for so long that the technology of recording has actually changed quite a bit, even in that, 7 years or whatever that we've been doing it. And it's always changing. So I just have to be always on top of the 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 software and the different technology that it requires to record the podcast. And that's probably what causes me the most stress, just making sure that I'm top of that. Just like crossing your fingers as we're 30 minutes deep into a podcast, hoping everything works okay. But so far
Absolutely.
so good. I haven't had any real problems in that.
Awesome. And also kind of maybe going off of that, like I was going to ask kind of how your role has evolved and maybe new skills and techniques. And I'm sure technology is a part of that. So I was wondering if you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say that I started with the behaviorist as an engineer, like specifically just recording and editing. Um, and I think that kind of as our trust grew and each other, that the role just kind of naturally morphed into more of a producer role. And I think the difference there is that as a producer, not only am I engineering the podcast, but I'm also responsible for the entire final product, which gives me a little bit more creative flexibility. Um, and that can present itself in many different ways.
Hmm.
Uh, anything from where I put the intro song to how I fade in and out of certain things. And there's just many minute details
Yeah.
throughout an episode that the listener probably doesn't even notice, but they were very purposeful choices on my end.
Yeah.
And I would say that there are so many skills that I've developed on the technical side. Um, I've become very efficient with editing and post, but aside from that, because we have so many different people
Hmm. Yeah.
on the behaviorist, not only as guests, like I said, but also hosting, it has actually allowed me to develop interpersonal skills, like in a professional setting. Um, and I would say that that's not something that I would have guessed would have been part of it, but just dealing with the different hosts for editing purposes or content or episode descriptions. Yeah, it's just something that I've developed, and I'm glad that I have. It's actually a very a very useful thing to develop and get better at.
Awesome. You're like a magician, like behind the scenes magician. It's like magic. It's awesome. Okay. And my last question is then if you could maybe design your own podcast separate from this, an ideal podcast episode or series, do you have anything that comes to mind? And like maybe what would it look like and what would be a theme?
Yeah, so well, like I mentioned before, I actually had my own podcast.
Right.
And what I did on that, I did around 60 episodes or so. And I would talk to mostly just people in the creative space, mostly musicians, um, or sometimes guitar builders or
Oh,
creators or artists or writers. I don't know if you know who Paul Frank is. He's just a world famous designer from like the really famous in like the 90s. I
uh,
reached out to him through a connection, and for whatever reason, he said yes. So I got to talk to him and pick his brain. So that was actually like super rewarding, talking to these creative people, listening to what their processes are. So, I mean, just to answer your question, that was it. I mean, I kind of did what I would have wanted to do with the podcast. And, I would say that itch for me has been scratched. Like I really don't have a desire to do it again, and maybe I will at some point. Um, but creating the content for a podcast is so hard, and that's why it's just a huge amount of work. And that's why I have so much respect for just all the people at Work Wisdom, especially because their episodes are so information heavy. Like they're not just hanging out and chit chatting. Like they want to be informative. That's the goal, so that people can learn from them. And it's just a ton of work to not only create the actual content, but just to come up with unique ideas. We've done so many episodes that it's hard to come up with new ideas and just be very informative about them. So honestly, it's just impressive, and it just makes me proud to be a part of a team like that.
so, so cool. And it's awesome that you kind of also have kind of like left your mark and were able to do that and have your own 60 episodes. That's excellent. And yeah, you're so impressive. Thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And yeah, have a good one.
Thank you. You too.